Perfect. Amazing. We are now set and we are now leaving the practice webinar. We are about to have guests. Welcome, Mona. If you could just go off camera for the moment, and I'll let Tim liaise with you in the chat around details. Thank you so much. Perfect. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of what I know is a busy time of year, especially as we are now 5 days from the federal election to join us for our Proud to Vote town hall. I'm just going to give it about 60 to 120 seconds for the room to fill up, for everyone to click those buttons in their emails, to then click the other button to open the Zoom. But we are very happy to have you here, and we'll kick off fully in just a minute or two. This is when I always say that I wish I had brought background music, but you will suffer without Chapel Roan, and I'm sorry. Perfect. I believe we're now at a good place. And so I want to say hello and welcome to our Proud to Vote Town Hall, a virtual discussion on 2SLGBTQIA plus issues and issues that matter to queer and trans people within the 2025 federal election. It is, of course, important to mention that the election is just 5 days away, with voting taking place on April 28th. If you have not voted, please exercise your democratic right and participate in our imperfect democracy and make a plan to vote on election day. We are going to have a lovely conversation today featuring representatives from the Liberal Party, the Green Party, and the New Democratic Party. And we are very grateful for those candidates who have made the time to have this conversation with us. My name is Faye Johnstone. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm the executive director of the Society of Queer Momentum. We are a national queer and trans advocacy organization focused on organizing and advocating to build a more free, equal, and socially just future for queer and trans communities, and indeed for everyone. And we are pleased to be one of the organizations making this event happen. If you have not attended a Proud to Vote event in the past, it is something that we've actually done in most of the last 3, potentially even 4 federal elections. In many contexts, they have been in-person discussions in different parts of the country. But as of, I think, the last election, we started bringing together a national conversation to help bring our voices and these conversations forward and make it more accessible for our friends, queer and trans people, families, and allies across the country to participate. As you know, there's a lot at stake for queer and trans communities in this election and beyond. It's occurring with a global backdrop of economic uncertainty, an affordability crisis, and also a global rise in anti-queer and anti-trans hate that we are indeed seeing here at home as well. And so I think it is important in this context that we listen to the voices of queer and trans people, but also that we hear from parties who want to represent us in government and in the House of Commons to understand their stance on queer and trans issues and issues that matter to us. So this is your opportunity to hear directly from those folks and to help understand why they think that they deserve your vote. Before we get into things, and I'm going to pass it along to our lovely moderator shortly, I do want to spend a moment to just recognize that I am joining today from unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, colonially known as Ottawa, and Queer Momentum is based in Chipuktuk-Mi'kmaq, colonially known as Halifax, Nova Scotia. Through our conversations today and through all of the work that we do, I invite us to connect the dots between legacies and ongoing realities of colonialism and the realities of homophobia and transphobia, to find paths forward that lift everybody up and build better futures where freedom, equality, and human rights include everybody. I also want to do a special shout out to our partner organizations who help make this event happen. In the queer and trans space, we lift each other up and we work together to make our magic possible. So I want to give a shout out in no particular order to our friends, the Conseil Québécois LGBT, to the Community-Based Research Center, to the Dignity Network Canada, Pride at Work Canada, our friends at the 519, and last but not least, the Enchanté Network. I also want to recognize that the Enchanté Network has provided the interpretation, has covered the cost of interpretation for this event, which has helped make it more accessible for our Francophone or Anglophone unilingual friends who may be in the audience right now. With that, I'm going to step back and invite our moderator, Zia Jones, the managing editor of Health with Xtra Magazine, who will be leading the conversation today. And we are very grateful to Pink Triangle Press for being a partner on this event and helping get the word out, and for all that they do, making sure that the queer and trans angle is not lost in Canada's media ecosystem. With that, I'll invite Zia to hop on screen and say hello.
Hi there, my name is Zia, and as Faye so graciously mentioned, I am a health editor over at Pink Triangle Press, the publisher that publishes Xtra Magazine, Canada's leading LGBTQ2S+ magazine. I'm very, very grateful to be here today. Thank you so much to Queer Momentum for having me, and to our partner organizations and to our representatives as well. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation that we're about to have. Some housekeeping notes before we start. Simultaneous interpretation is being offered this evening. All you need to do is press the button at the bottom of your screen. Pour les francophones dans l'audience, la traduction simultanée serait offerte pendant l'événement. Il faut juste
Simultaneous interpretation will be available throughout the event. You can just click on the icon at the bottom of your screen.
Closed captioning is also being offered this evening, and the chat will be closed due to safety and inclusivity concerns. However, we have a bunch of partner organizations that have come with some great questions to ask. This event will be recorded and will be posted on YouTube, but if you are in the audience, your faces will not be shown, so you don't have to worry about that. And we welcome you to take photos and to post on social media with the hashtag #ProudToVote. The structure of this evening will be as follows. We will have opening remarks from each of our participants. Those will last about 2 to 3 minutes each per candidate. So candidates, please keep your opening remarks within that time frame. Then we will have a series of questions posed by our partner organizations, and they will be on the following topics. First, the economy, then 2SLGBTQIA+ health. Next, support for 2SLGBTQIA+ organizations, then decriminalization, then freedom and human rights, and finally, international issues. With that, I would love to introduce our party representatives for the evening. From the Liberal Party of Canada, we have Yasser Naqvi, a candidate in Ottawa Centre, and Mona Fortier, a candidate in Ottawa Vanier. They will be swapping out at the hour mark due to an existing commitment. From the New Democratic Party, we have Beau Shaw, a candidate in Calgary Centre. And from the Green Party, we have Jazz Rain, a candidate in Peterborough. At this time, I would like to invite our honored guests to deliver their opening remarks. The order has been determined randomly, so we will start in the order that they were introduced: the Liberal Party, then the New Democratic Party, then the Green Party. And throughout, I will indicate when we will mix up that order, so it won't be the same order answering the questions all throughout. But candidates, please proceed with your opening arguments, or your opening statements, rather.
I think, Zia, I'm Yasser Naqvi here, the Liberal candidate. You're asking me to start. Thank you very much. You just took me back to a courtroom, but I said start opening arguments. As a lawyer, I felt a little bit of PTSD. But thank you very much for giving myself and my colleague and friend Mona Fortier an opportunity and accommodating us as I have to drop off close to 7 o'clock for another engagement, and Mona has kindly has agreed to be there for the second part. My name is Yasser Naqvi. I go by the pronouns he, him. I'm the federal Liberal candidate in Ottawa Centre. Mona Fortier, my colleague, is the Liberal candidate in Ottawa, Vanier, Gloucester. Let me just start personally, because I feel very strongly as to my background. I really consider myself a product of Canada. My family and I came to Canada when I was a boy, fleeing dictatorship. And Canada took our family not with fear, but with hope. It gave us safety. It gave us freedom. And most importantly, it gave us equality. And I've, as a result, spent my life giving back. And that's the chance that has shaped me, and I am now continuously fighting to protect it, because that's the promise of Canada that's under threat as we speak. This is a very important and consequential election. We are seeing the threat of Donald Trump, the manner in which he's trampling on people's rights. And I personally fear that Pierre Poilievre is very much following the same dangerous playbook that we are seeing in the United States. It's around division, it's about rage farming, it's about culture wars designed to pit neighbor against neighbor. And we're seeing Pierre Poilievre using the same playbook, same politics of division, slogans and nicknames that is so not becoming of Canadian. We cannot let that take hold here, and we cannot afford to become the 51st state. Canada must be different. It must be better, built on kindness, grounded in justice, and powered by compassion. And that's the Canada I believe in, and the kind of politics I have practiced. And I know Mona agrees with me. When I was a member of provincial parliament, I worked with other political parties, both NDP and Progressive Conservatives, in amending the Ontario Human Rights Code to include the protections for gender diversity and gender expression, the first jurisdiction in Canada to do so. As the Attorney General of our province, I introduced and passed the All Families Are Equal Act, ensuring legal recognition for same-sex, gender diverse, and multi-parent families. It was about one thing: dignity for every person and every family. That's what allyship, in my view, looks like. Action, not just words. And that's the work we will keep doing. In this moment, when rights are being rolled back around the world, we can't afford to sit on the sidelines. We must fight, we must protect, and we must build. If you believe in a Canada where everyone can live with safety, respect, and love, then let's stand together and make it real. And Mona and I urge you to consider voting Liberal on Monday, April the 28th. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will now invite the New Democratic Party to make their opening statement.
Hi, everybody. My name is Beau Shaw. I use he and him pronouns. I think I'm actually one of two trans people in the room today, presenting on behalf of myself and my party. I started running because I'm a queer person living in Alberta. Of course, we're talking about rights being rolled back. Well, it's already at our doorstep here in Alberta, and I took that as an opportunity to fight back. Unfortunately, I could not run for the Liberal Party of Canada because of their outright genocide denial in this election and prior to. That, I think, is a real big indicator as to where our priorities are as a country. And if we can't say no to genocide, then I really don't have faith that trans people's rights and queer people's rights will be at the top of the agenda, right? We did see, some cabinet rearrangements that I'm not too happy with. Of course, as a citizen, as a constituent, as a taxpayer, I know that my rights are fundamental and our rights are enshrined in the Charter. Now, making sure that our Charter rights are upheld is a task for our current and incoming government. And the fact is that our current government could have done more to make sure that our rights as queer and trans people were protected from the jump. It didn't have to be an election promise. It could have been done before. And I really hope that people consider, looking at their current elected officials and also their incumbents and their incoming, representatives, and make sure that their feet are held to the fire on that. Of course, myself and the NDP unequivocally support human rights and have worked towards supporting human rights for all people, right? That includes, queer and trans people abroad, right? I think making sure that our representatives are not only savvy, but are acting in our best interest is the way forward for the queer community. Thanks.
Thank you. And now I invite our Green Party candidate to make their opening statements.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for having me today. Before I introduce myself, I want to extend sincere apologies from Elizabeth May, who I know was really looking forward to this conversation. I spoke with her this afternoon, and she has to be at an important meeting this evening with the Sayut Nation, who had to change the time of the meeting tonight due to a difficult death in their community. So she asked me to express her regret at missing this conversation. So a little bit about me. My name is Jasmine Rain, or Jazz Rain. My pronouns are they, them. I am a white settler living in Negojibwanong, or colonially known as Peterborough, where I'm running for MP in this election. I'm a doctoral student studying the ways that we as trans and gender diverse adults can be better supported by clinicians in Ontario and how we can participate in policy writing to help to co-create the conditions for us to age safely. So I'm running for the Green Party because my personal axiological or ethical commitments align deeply with those of the Green Party. We're the only party that has put radical tax reform on the table. We don't whip our vote. We're pushing very hard for electoral reform. And we really, really treat the social, political, institutional, and economic crises that we're in as interconnected and as in need of change. So the Green Party was the first federal party to fully support LGBT rights in Canada. We were the first to elect an openly gay leader, Chris Lee, from 1991 to 1996. We're the first to elect a trans person, Dr. Kuttner, as the leader of a federal political party. So we know exactly what we stand for, and we continue to push hard for real and meaningful, community-driven change. I'm deeply, deeply honored and grateful to be here on Elizabeth's behalf today, representing the Green Party of Canada, and I'm so grateful to be in community with you all. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our candidates. Now I would like to invite Jade Pichette from Pride at Work Canada to ask our first question focused on the economy. And candidates, you can answer in the order that you gave your opening statements.
Thank you, Zia, Queer Momentum, and to all the candidates for joining us today for today's town hall. Pride at Work Canada is a member services nonprofit focused on creating a Canada where every individual can achieve their full potential at work, regardless of gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And we're quite honored to ask today's first question. So, this is on the mind of a lot of Canadians, which is the affordability crisis that we are all facing, from rising housing costs to the soaring price of essentials, while wages remain stagnant. For 2SLGBTQIA plus communities, these challenges are compounded by systemic income, wealth, and employment disparities. In fact, research from the Social Research and Demonstration Corporation, as well as the Trans Pulse Project, have shown that in particular, bisexual and trans individuals earn significantly less than their cisgender and heterosexual peers. So I'm wondering and asking today of the three of you, what concrete actions will your party take to reduce these disparities and address the unique economic barriers facing 2SLGBTQI plus people? Thank you.
Thank you, Jade, for that really important question. And let me start by giving sort of a macro answer around the various measures that the Liberal Party has announced in its platform to ease the affordability crisis. That includes taking away the carbon price on pollution from consumers. That will save people a lot of money, but also introducing an income tax cut, especially for lower income folks, so that people can save more money. We're also championing farmer care and dental care, working in collaboration with other parties like the NDP to ensure that more people especially who are marginalized, get these important healthcare services. But the fact remains, as your question outlined, that 2SLGBTQI plus communities still face so many frustration when it comes to systemic barriers that impacts their livelihood. And we still need to make sure that when we talk about child rights, that everybody's treated equally and have the capacity to live their full lives and not be subjected to poverty because of their gender identity or sexual orientations. And that's why we have made, as a party, as a government, funding permanent for the 2SLGBTQI plus community capacity fund to support very important organizations that provide crucial supports to folks that are facing discrimination, so that there is advocacy and assistance there from within the community for folks across the country. In addition, as part of the 2SLGBTQI plus National Action Plan. We have funded $25 million for a 2SLGBTQI plus entrepreneurship program, again, to create opportunities to encourage members of the queer community to have their own businesses led by them, run by them, and to be successful. This is the kind of work that is ongoing. I'll be the first one to say that we have more to do, but that work only happens in collaboration with the community, and the Liberal Party is absolutely committed to doing that work.
Thank you very much. And I now invite the New Democratic Party.
Yeah, I just want to clarify as well that funding for the 2SLGBTQIA fund has not been made permanent as of yet. I will also make mention that WAGE, the Women and Gender Equality program, the cabinet minister was removed from the current cabinet. Although we've slimmed a cabinet, of course, prior to an election, I think that showing our commitment to making sure that women and queer people are not left behind was a misstep, right, by the Liberals, but from not including them in their plan moving forward as a cabinet minister. So first, of course, the NDP would reinstate this cabinet position to show our commitment to advancing equity even when times are tough. I do want to make mention that most of us don't have access to entrepreneurship. Most of us don't have more than $500 for an emergency. So I do find that some propositions by the Liberal Party are insufficient, right, to deal with the actual poverty that our community is facing, right? A loan from the government when we don't have a dollar to our name because we can't get a job in, even the service industry. It's not good enough. I think that making sure that there are trained, like basically job training programs, right? Apprenticeship programs in tech, in skilled labor, in all of these sectors, right? Sector-based initiatives are the way forward in making sure that queer people are included in our economy and in our workplace, right? Myself, I actually attended a presentation from Pride at Work Canada this year about their empowering 2SLGBTQIA workers in Canadian energy. And I think that's a wonderful project, and it was able to be funded just before the election was called. So I'm really thankful for programs like that, and more programs along that vein are what the NDP support moving forward.
Thank you. And I invite the Green Party to give their answer.
Thank you. So I and the Green Party of Canada are committed to building an economy that works for everyone, including 2SLGBTQIA plus communities who face persistent economic disparities. We're working very hard to disrupt the ridiculous and outmoded free market neoliberal economic approach that we continue to be trapped in so long as a two-party electoral system dominates, and to push for transformational policies that will address the systemic issues that legislate and even criminalize poverty. We plan to implement a guaranteed livable income to ensure a dignified standard of living for all, regardless of employment status or identity. We strongly support much more robust employment equity laws, and we plan to expand the Employment Equity Act to include robust protections for gender identity and expression. We also want to invest in social housing, affordable and inclusive healthcare, especially mental health services tailored to LGBTQIA plus needs. Further, we champion employment policies that reflect best practices highlighted by Pride at Work Canada, such as mandatory inclusion training, gender-affirming workplace policies, and support for transitioning employees. And as someone who does research in this field, I would like to see the federal government incentivize employers to adopt these practices and to require federally regulated workplaces to meet inclusive standards.
Thank you very much, candidates. I would like to now invite Emmett Mark from the Dignity Network Canada to ask their question to our guests.
Great. Thank you so much, Zia. Thank you to our guests who are joining us on this call today. Dignity Network Canada is a coalition of over 60 Canadian NGOs looking to advance the human rights of LGBTIQ people internationally. And Canada has demonstrated leadership in supporting human rights for LGBTIQ people in its foreign policy and international development efforts across successive administrations. In 2019, the Government of Canada launched the LGBTQ2I International Assistance Program, committing $10 million annually from Canada's official development assistance towards advancing LGBTIQ rights globally. In light of rising anti-LGBTIQ backlash in many countries across the world, including the imposition of harsher anti-gay laws and policies, how would your party strengthen and expand Canada's support for LGBTIQ communities through foreign policy, diplomacy, and international assistance?
I'll invite candidates to respond in the following order: Jazz Rain, Beau Shaw, and then Yasser Naqvi.
So the Green Party is firmly committed to global human rights and will strengthen Canada's leadership in defending LGBTQ rights through a justice-based foreign policy. I would advocate for a significant increase in funding for the LGBTQ2I International Assistance Program, ensuring that it supports grassroots organizations and frontline defenders, as it has been, especially in regions facing severe anti-LGBTIQ repression. Thank you. Sorry. I would like to see us embed queer and trans rights in all international aid, trade, and diplomatic efforts, pushing for Canadian embassies to provide safe refuge, supporting asylum for LGBTQIA refugees, and promote inclusive multilateral policies. I'm trying to use the acronym that every one of the stakeholders uses to be respectful of your own policies and the way that you're moving. We will also support the creation of a permanent ambassador level role for global LGBTIQ rights within Global Affairs Canada to coordinate efforts across departments and to amplify Canada's voice on the world stage, working in partnership with international and local civil society to ensure that Canadian support reflects community-led priorities and resists neo-colonial models of aid.
Thank you so much. Beau Shaw?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful answer from the Green Party, and I'm so pleased to hear it. Of course, the NDP are in full agreement with making sure that on the diplomatic stage as well as domestically, we are, putting our money where our mouth is. I believe our government should create a specific pathway to citizenship for gender and sexually diverse people fleeing countries where their right to life, liberty, and security are not upheld. Of course, I have to mention that $10 million annually is actually a very small number compared to the $50 billion a year we funnel into corporate welfare programs, or the $39 billion a year we lose to offshore tax avoidance. The NDP are committed to making sure that our tax dollars are used to help people first, including the protection and expansion of current commitments in our unwavering support for human rights at home and abroad.
Thank you very much. And Yasser Naqvi?
Thank you very much for this important question. But before I answer the question directly, I do want to say that we believe we are at our very best when we work together. Protecting rights, expanding rights, guaranteeing rights is never a partisan issue. It's something that we do really well when we are working together. That's how Mona and I and our colleagues in the Liberal Party has operated, to make sure that we're working with all parties to protect the rights of all communities, including 2SLGBTQI plus community. I'm saddened to see that the Conservatives are not in this conversation right now. I was really to see they purporting transphobic stereotypes in their platform yesterday. I think all of us progressive parties that are present here, we need to make sure that we're working in unison, we're working together so that we protect the rights of more people in our country, and not only just in our country, but around the world. And it's a really important point, because misinformation and disinformation and hate campaigns have no borders. We're seeing that being spilled over in our country, especially from the United States. We need to project inclusion and our strong democratic values, both inwards and outwards. And if we do not project inclusion in our foreign policy and spending, we will see that hate rise not only abroad, but also right here in our country as well. And that's why, as a Liberal Party, in our platform, Canada Strong, we are proposing to add funding to the LGBTQI plus international assistance program, as well as to expand the Rainbow Refugee Assistance partnership. These are very important component from our party's perspective, and we were fully supportive and look forward to working with other parties and the good ideas that they may have, also to ensure that we are protecting the rights of the community here in Canada, but also abroad.
Thank you very much, candidates. It is now my pleasure to invite Delana from the Enchanté Network to ask our next question.
Hi, yeah, thank you. The Enchanté Network is a network of over 200 Pride centers and 2SLGBTQI organizations across the country, and we facilitate networking as well as programming support and advocacy support to ensure we have a strong and unified voice. So my question, the 2SLGBTQI plus sector is a young and growing part of the nonprofit landscape, playing a vital role in ensuring that two-spirit, queer, and trans people have access to the advocacy, services, and supports they need to thrive. However, the sector is facing significant and growing challenges in the current context of rising hate. Organizations are reporting increased demand for services, heightened staff burnout, concerns for the safety of both staff and community members amid targeted hate campaigns, and reductions in funding from non-governmental sources, resulting in layoffs and cutbacks in critical programming. Now more than ever, long-term stable government funding is essential to ensure this sector can continue to meet community needs and push back against growing threats. What's your party's position on funding the 2SLGBTQI sector?
I'll invite candidates to respond in the following order: Jas Rain of the Green Party of Canada, Beau Shaw of the New Democratic Party of Canada, and then Yasser Naqvi of the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. So we see the 2SLGBTQI plus sector as essential to the well-being, safety, and empowerment of queer and trans communities. And we know and can see that the sector is under immense pressure, facing service demand, funding cuts, and rising hate by fascist regimes and within the proliferation of right-wing populism. So we believe that long-term, stable, and accessible federal funding is critical and was needed yesterday. The Green government is looking to establish core multi-year operational funding for critical not-for-profits and 2SLGBTQI plus organizations, prioritizing those led by and serving marginalized communities, including Two-Spirit, BIPOC, and rural populations. We're looking to streamline funding processes to reduce administrative burden and to ensure that small grassroots organizations can access support. We also commit to creating a federal strategy to combat anti-2SLGBTQIA plus hate, including protections for service providers and funding for safety infrastructure. The Greens are going to embed equity in all policy and all budget decisions, recognizing that this support is just the first step in creating the conditions for safer communities and populations.
Thank you very much. Beau Shaw?
Yeah, of course, I wholeheartedly agree with Jas and the Green Party's position. Also, of course, the NDP are committed to funding the 2SLGBTQIA plus sector by refocusing our tax system to benefit people first. Long-term, stable funding can only come from using our tax base where it counts, supporting people and making sure that they have access to healthcare, they have access to safe housing, they have access to services that benefit themselves, their communities, and their loved ones. Many nonprofits serving the queer community provide essential health services. And of course, as we all know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? My husband actually worked for a queer healthcare organization in Ottawa that provided monkeypox vaccines on the ground as the crisis broke out here in Canada. And services like that are imperative to maintaining the safety and security of all Canadians, not just the queer community, right? I think making sure that we're having adequate funding and staffing for these organizations is imperative, right? I think our nonprofit sector is invaluable to providing access to health and other services for the queer community and other like community organizations as well. Like this is not just the queer community. Nonprofits across all identity groups actually provide these sorts of services that are culturally knowledgeable, they are apt, they are appropriate, right? And they provide a stopgap while our system catches up, right? Because the only reason we need to provide our own healthcare and our own mental health services and our own, you name it, right, is because our current healthcare system and our current systematic oppression of queer people keeps us from accessing adequate and timely healthcare services. So, of course, I support any initiative, and I think that we do have the money to actually fund more of these programs moving forward.
Thank you so much. And now I invite Yasser Naqvi to respond.
Thank you, Zia, and I agree with my colleagues for in their answers and in terms of the need for ensuring that we've got appropriate funding for 2S LGBTQIA plus communities who do really important work. It is important that those services are provided by members of the community and in various regions across the country in appropriate languages, in cultural context, urban, rural. Differences, all those things needs to be always kept in mind to provide for those appropriate services. The Liberal Party is steadfast in our support for this funding. Many of you would know that in the last government, we saw the National Action Plan, which invested $100 million in total. 75 million of that was just for organizations to do this important work. In our platform, Canada Strong, that we've just recently outlined, we have committed to make the funding permanent for the 2S LGBTQI plus Community Capacity Fund to support these organizations that provide these crucial supports to meet the mounting needs of the community. I think that's a really important step. In addition, we know there has been security challenges around Pride festivals as well, and our platform speaks to providing Pride festivals funding for security. Is extremely unfortunate. It breaks my heart even thinking about it that we need funding for Pride festivals, which has always been a movement of inclusion and rights. But given the context and the climate we live in, we need to make sure that there is funding for security, and that's part of our platform as well.
Thank you to all the candidates for your answers. Next, I would like to invite Michael Quagg from the Community-Based Research Center to ask our next question.
Thanks, Zia. As they mentioned, I'm Michael Quagg, Executive Director with the Community-Based Research Center, or CBRC, and we are a national 2S LGBTQIA plus health research and health promotion organization. So on to my question. Access to free and comprehensive healthcare is a cherished value in Canada. Yet the difficulty in accessing care for what you need, when you need it, is an experience that far too many people in this country can relate to. These difficulties are often exacerbated for queer, trans, and two-spirit people, who often face unique barriers to care, including stigma, discrimination, and a lack of cultural competency. Barriers which are even more pronounced for 2S LGBTQI plus people who are racialized, disabled, and are facing housing, income, or food insecurity. At the same time, our communities have some pretty unique health needs related to our sexual orientation and gender identity, such as in the areas of sexual, reproductive, and gender-affirming care. So my question is, what actions would your party take to strengthen and improve access to healthcare for 2S LGBTQI plus people and communities, and ensure that our unique health needs are being meaningfully considered and addressed?
I'll invite the candidates to respond in the following order: Beau Shaw, Yasser Naqvi, and Jasrain.
Thank you so much for the question, Michael. Of course, as a civilian, I've worked with CBRC very, very closely and greatly appreciate the work that they do. The statistics from our community gathered by the CBRC are paramount to informing policy decisions in our government. The NDP and myself, of course, again, we'll make sure that, research and community consultation is done in an appropriate manner, is funded appropriately, and continues to inform our policy-making decisions moving forward. In terms of accessing healthcare, the NDP has actually proposed a program to make sure that every single Canadian has a doctor by 2030. That's a really steep increase in access to care, but also continuing to make sure that culturally competent services are available for people like me, right? Of course, also expanding the Canada Health Act to ensure that the Americanization of our healthcare system does not proliferate any further, and that American companies cannot buy Canadian healthcare infrastructure, and that you will not be billed for healthcare services, full stop, right? I think in terms of making sure that trans people and two-spirit people and other queer folks are able to access care that is specific to them, of course, having training programs for our doctors would be imperative, and making sure that that is informed by our community and our needs as a community, right? There are spiritual needs, there are cultural needs, there are actual physical needs that our community has that are not necessarily met by standard GP care. And of course, funding programs for doctors to become trained and competent in those competencies would be a way moving forward to make sure that, I'm not going to a gynecologist, for example, and experiencing any diminishing of the level of care that I should receive for a physical need.
Thank you. Yasser Naqvi.
Thank you very much. And I think this is such an important question. And it's a question that around healthcare that, as we all know, straddles between the things the federal government can do, but the delivery of healthcare very much a provincial responsibility. But making sure that under Canada Health Act, provinces and territories are providing appropriate care to members of the 2SLGBTQI plus community, and care that is appropriate to their needs as well. I have personal experience working in that space when I sat on the board of directors of a community health center right here in downtown Ottawa, Centertown Community Health Center, which provides incredible services for community writ large, but also in particularly for the 2SLGBTQI plus community. And when I was a provincial member, getting very specific funding for not only gay and lesbian community, but also for trans community, for two-spirit community, so that they have those appropriate sources available from service providers, healthcare providers who may also come from those communities. So our commitment as a party remains that we will do everything in our capacity to make sure that those services are there, that the appropriate funding is there, and that we are working with provinces to also ensure that they are not taking away those services, especially to many maybe considered marginalized. The other couple of points specifically that I want to make that I think health related, one is around access to gender affirming care, which is extremely important. Like a woman's right to choose, the access to gender affirming care is not about an individual's decisions or circumstances, but it's really a stake in the ground for the right to self-determination in a free and democratic society. And I think we have to be all really mindful of that gender affirming care is available for folks, and that government or governments are not using the notwithstanding clause in the charter to take away those rights for individuals. That's something that we have to be really mindful of. We've seen conservative premiers in the country use the charter against communities and taken away the rights of those communities, and in fact putting them in even further danger. That is unacceptable, and we as the Liberal Party will never resort to using the notwithstanding clause. In fact, we stand against it. We have updated the public health service care plan under the federal government, and that plan now includes up to $75,000 per lifetime for gender affirming healthcare expenses, which is a very important step. Lastly, one of the things that I want to mention that's part of our platform in this election is funding for IVF treatments that will make it easier for 2SLGBTQI plus folks to start families if they choose to do so. That funding is something that's been sought and advocated for some time, and I'm really excited to see that as part of our platform this election. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jasrain?
Thank you very much for this question. This is an area of particular interest to myself. The Green Party is looking to expand the Canada Healthcare Act, integrating Medicaid into Medicare, funding a Canada-wide pharmacare program, and to enter into an agreement with any province to make it so that they agree to fully fund health services for children and adults who are not adequately or currently covered by private health plans. We're also looking to really support gender-affirming care, whatever that means to the individual. Personally, as a researcher and a person interested in data-driven and science-backed policy, I am constantly baffled by the non-uptake of new and existing scientific knowledges in policy spaces. So the Greens are looking to take up emergent knowledge and research. You know, obviously our plan is pretty radical, very, very progressive, very supportive of queer and trans access to healthcare. But I think that it is also important in this space, given the fact that we have multiple candidates here and a bunch of viewers, to really encourage everybody to speak with your representatives and to make sure that you know that it's not appropriate to pass the buck to the provinces as federal government to say, well, the province just cut all funding to Kate Greenaway's Connect Clinic in Ontario, where many queer and trans people were relying on for over a decade to receive access to gender-affirming care, and we're left without supportive clinical support. Now, my own research is in queer and trans access to healthcare in the province of Ontario and also in the state of Canada, nation state of Canada, sorry. And in my research, I'm finding that we're producing important knowledge about gender-affirming healthcare every single day. And, you know, both the Liberal and Conservative governments receive these policy briefs and it fails to be implemented in any meaningful way. We don't have enough family doctors. We don't have enough nurse practitioners. We don't have enough PSWs. We don't have any real clinical support, and the clinical training in medical schools and nursing schools is not adequate in supporting queer and trans people throughout the life course. So personally, I'm looking to shore up much more robust and meaningful support for us and to hold us all to account. Thank you.
Thank you to all our candidates for their answers. A few brief notes before we move on to the next question. The first is that Mona Fortier will be joining the answering now, and she will be taking over for Yasser Naqvi. Second, the next question will be asked in French. So if you are a unilingual Anglophone in the audience, please feel free to turn on your simultaneous translation at the bottom of your screen. J'ai maintenant le plaisir d'inviter Fred Catherine Lavarenne du Conseil LGBTQ québécois à poser notre prochaine question.
Bonsoir. Le Conseil québécois LGBT est une coalition de plus de 85 groupes communautaires et organismes queer au Québec. Notre mission est de défendre les droits des personnes de la diversité sexuelle et de genre au Québec. Ma question pour les candidats et candidates, de quelle façon votre parti propose-t-il de protéger les droits des personnes LGBTQ+, surtout les droits des jeunes trans et non-binaires, dans un contexte où les provinces utilisent la clause dérogatoire pour proposer des projets de loi qui contreviennent à la Charte canadienne des droits et libertés?
Et les candidates peuvent répondre dans l'ordre suivant: Beauchamp, Mona Fortier et Jasrain.
All right. Yeah, thank you for the question. I did take the liberty of reading it quite thoroughly before answering. So the notwithstanding clause has been abused by provinces like Saskatchewan to revoke the rights of transgender people. I believe this is criminal behavior. And any government worth its salt would eliminate the ability for the notwithstanding clause to infringe on any Section 15 rights, equality rights within the Charter. At the very least, If we don't, it leaves all Canadians vulnerable to dismissal of their rights on the basis of race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, or mental or physical disability. That's how we end up with internment camps, folks. And that needs to end. We have had every successive government prior to now to end notwithstanding clause being used to revoke people's rights on the basis of their essential identity, right? I think the NDP is in full favor of eliminating Section 15 at the very least, and at the very most, eliminating the notwithstanding clause altogether with consultation, adequate consultation, in particular with the Francophone community, because the notwithstanding clause, let's not forget, was brought in to protect Francophone interests and to protect Quebecois folks in particular, right, from their rights being trampled on by our federal government.
Thank you very much. Mona Fortier.
Ben, bonjour, merci beaucoup de m'accueillir ce soir. Je ne sais pas si vous m'entendez bien. Ça a l'air que oui. Alors, merci. Comme fière franco-ontarienne, je suis heureuse de pouvoir participer avec vous et dire que clairement, moi, je m'oppose à l'utilisation de la clause dérogatoire. On a vu dans le passé des provinces s'en servir de façon irresponsable et souvent, c'est pour cibler les personnes qui sont vulnérables. Donc, pour moi, c'est important que l'on ne l'utilise pas à cette fin. Et les conservateurs parlent de liberté, mais on voit ce qu'on voit dans leurs actions, leur comportement. C'est plutôt une volonté d'imposer la conformité et le contrôle. Alors aussi, je pense que l'accès aux soins d'affirmation de genre, tout comme le droit de choisir pour des femmes, n'est pas une question de choix individuel, c'est une question de droit fondamental à l'autodétermination dans une société libre et démocratique comme nous avons au pays aujourd'hui. Et aussi, il est essentiel de défendre les jeunes parce que, vous savez, la droite utilise présentement ces enjeux non seulement pour les intimider, mais aussi pour contrôler l'expression du genre dans son ensemble. Et ça, c'est profondément inquiétant. Même mes enfants m'en parlent de façon quotidienne. Alors, on l'a mentionné tantôt, mais je vais le dire de nouveau dans la plateforme. Nous voulons continuer à financer la sécurité des activités de fierté partout au pays. Nous voulons aussi nous assurer que on puisse étendre et élargir le programme de contestation judiciaire, qui est un autre élément avec lequel la communauté a discuté, entre autres, avec moi lorsque je travaillais sur la plateforme libérale. Alors, c'est deux éléments que nous avons dans la plateforme. Ma réponse doit rester courte, donc je vous remercie de m'avoir permis de commencer en français. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. And Jasrain.
Oh, thank you. Merci. I strongly oppose the abuse of the notwithstanding clause to override charter rights, particularly when used to target queer and trans youth. The clause, Section 33 of the Canadian Charter for Rights and Freedoms, was intended as a rare exception and not as a political weapon, but in recent years, provincial governments have invoked it preemptively to pass laws that restrict gender-affirming education policies, limit access to healthcare, and force teachers to out trans students, all without any form of judicial review. This misuse undermines fundamental rights and erodes constitutional protections for youth being made vulnerable by transphobic, homophobic, colonial, and cis-heteronormative policies and rhetorics. As the Canadian Civil Liberties Association has warned, invoking the clause to bypass court scrutiny endangers democratic accountability, and it invites further violations of minority rights. National legal experts stress that this trend poses a grave threat to trans rights in Canada, particularly for youth whose safety and dignity depend on legal recognition and support. A Green government plans to work to strengthen charter protections and to push for reforms that limit the use of the notwithstanding clause. We stand unequivocally with trans youth, their families, and allies in defending human rights, bodily autonomy, and access to gender-affirming care.
Thank you, everyone. Merci tout le monde pour vos réponses. It is now my pleasure to invite Kieran from the 519 to ask our next question.
Good evening, folks. Curran Stickets, he, him, Director of Advocacy and Communications at the 519. The 519 is committed to the health, happiness, and full participation of 2S LGBTQ communities. As Canada's largest 2S LGBTQ serving organization, we strive to make a real difference in people's lives while working to advance equity, justice, and community strength. My question this evening is about HIV decriminalization. In June 2019, Parliament's Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights released a report recommending an overhaul of Canada's approach to criminalizing people living with HIV. All parties expressed support for the majority of the recommendations, but 6 years later, there has been no meaningful action. Canada continues to have one of the highest rates of HIV-related prosecutions in the world, despite overwhelming scientific consensus affirmed by Health Canada, the Attorney General of Canada, the World Health Organization, and the CDC, that people with suppressed or undetectable viral loads cannot transmit the virus to sexual partners even when no condom is used. Will your party commit to decriminalizing all cases involving people with an undetectable viral load? And given government inaction, how can we trust that you'll finally bring Canada's laws in line with science, public health, and human rights?
Thank you. I invite the candidates to respond in the following order: Mona Fortier, Jazrain, and Beauchamp.
Merci beaucoup. Et puis, c'est une question qui est très importante. It's a very important question, and it has a lot to do where we'll need to work together, of course, to pursue the work that already has been done, and to make sure that we continue to not only engage with stakeholders like the Canadian Coalition to Reform HIV Criminalization, ensuring policy development moves forward. I think that we have a lot of work that we can do together. Unfortunately, the past few months when we were in the House, Conservatives' obstruction through privilege motions made it where it was very difficult to do any work in the House. I know that the committee worked very hard, and those recommendations need to be looked into closely so we can move forward and work together. And also, we know that it is often those who are most marginalized who live with HIV, and it should be dealt with as a public health issue. And also undetectable is untransmissible. So I believe that we need to move forward, work together. I know that a lot of my caucus colleagues were ready to move forward. But hopefully, now that we will be able to be in the next parliament, we can get that action done together. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Mona. Jazrain?
Yes, we are committed to decriminalizing HIV non-disclosure in cases when individuals have an undetectable viral load, aligning our laws with current science, human rights, and public health. We recognize that undetectable is untransmissible, and that criminalizing people living with HIV only fuels stigma, discourages testing, and undermines well-articulated public health goals. We're looking to remove the blood ban on blood donations, which I should add is ridiculous. I, along with the Greens, also support the full decriminalization of sex work, which is important to note here. Current laws disproportionately harm marginalized or minoritized communities, especially queer and trans sex workers of color, who already face barriers to housing, healthcare, and employment. Criminalization increases vulnerability to violence, exploitation, and HIV transmission while making it harder for workers to seek support or protection. We're looking to reform the criminal code to end unjust prosecutions and to work with provinces and territories to expand access to HIV prevention, treatment, and harm reduction services. We're looking to fund community-led organizations, ensure that the most affected are leading the solutions because nothing about us without us. We at the Green Party know that there is no scientific reason for blood bans. We know that as it pertains to HIV, undetectable means untransmissible. We know the consequences of stigmatization, and yet the laws and policies that we are living under fail to reflect this. The Green Party of Canada works with communities, with scientists, with research to ensure that our policies reflect scientific, social, and economic realities. It is profoundly concerning to me that in the last 6 years, Canada is still failing to keep up with the science.
Thank you very much. And I invite Bosha to respond.
Yes, I want to thank Jazz for their very, very thorough answer. As someone who regularly gives blood and has to explain my answers to the questionnaire in order to be allowed to give blood as a queer and trans person, right? I understand that stigma really runs deep in our systems, and in particular as it pertains to HIV positive individuals, right? I think, again, like the science is clear that HIV undetectable folks cannot transmit the disease to their partners even when having unprotected sex. I think that amnesty in certain cases where HIV transmission was involuntary should also be considered by our government. I think that decriminalizing, of course, makes sense, of course, is backed up by the science, and of course, is fully supported by the NDP. I think another way that folks can make sure that our priorities as a community are put forward is supporting more folks from our community getting to Parliament, right? I think that it's really rare for us to see two queer folks on a panel discussing queer issues, and I really want to thank Xtra. I really want to thank Society of Queer Momentum, and I really want to thank everyone for joining us here tonight because honestly, that is the most heartening thing I've seen this entire election because our issues have gone entirely undiscussed.
Thank you very much to all our candidates. I'd now like to invite Faye Johnstone from Queer Momentum to ask her question.
Thank you. And thank you, candidates, for taking time out of your days to join us for this conversation. You've already heard from me before, but my name is Faye Johnstone, Executive Director of Queer Momentum. We're a national queer and trans advocacy organization. And alongside other organizations, we're one of the groups that's been on the front lines in Saskatchewan and Alberta, trying to support our queer and trans siblings, young folks and their families, as they see governments rolling back on their rights, their freedom, and their healthcare access. Across Canada and around the world, we're witnessing a global backlash on the freedom and rights of queer and trans people, accompanied by an increase in hate and hate-motivated violence and other forms of discrimination. As you know, that does indeed extend to those two Canadian provinces where we're seeing legislation and policies that limit freedom, quality, healthcare access. Queer and trans Canadians are scared for their future, are scared for their safety, and scared for their freedom. I want you to imagine the experience of a mom in Alberta who's unable to get her kid access to the care that that child needs, and has to wonder if they need to leave the province that they love, that they adore, that they've grown up in order to save their kid's life. Because for that kid in that context, that healthcare is life-saving care. I want you to imagine the experience of a trans 15-year-old in Saskatchewan who isn't safe to be themselves at home and is now being bullied and mistreated more at school than they were before. I want you to imagine the dad who wakes up scared to put their kid on the bus, and to understand that that's the Canada that we already live in. That is the Canada that queer and trans people exist in Canada today. Given these attacks on queer and trans rights at home and abroad, if your party forms government, or if you yourself are elected to office, will you and how will you stand up for transgender young folks, their families, and queer people more broadly? More specifically, what steps will you take to ensure that freedom and human rights are upheld for everyone, including queer and trans people? And maybe to end, how will you make sure that we increase the pace of equality so that progress isn't something that happens 5 lifetimes from now, but in this generation of queer and trans young people's lives? Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. I invite candidates to answer in the following order: Beau Shaw, Jazz Rain, and Mona Fortier.
Yeah, I think that's a really timely and poignant question, Faye. Thank you so much. And, as a trans person in Alberta, I am experiencing the rights of people like me being rolled back by our government and our federal government doing nothing to stop it. Right? Again, successive governments have had the opportunity to limit the notwithstanding clause, but have failed to do so. There is the way forward is, of course, limiting the notwithstanding clause first and foremost, right? Encouraging education and uplifting our communities through funding initiatives that serve us and put us in a position to be able to advocate for ourselves. As a grassroots activist, I've actually organized prides across Alberta with a group called Queer Citizens United. And regardless of whether or not I make it into office, I'm going to be banging on every single MP's door, every single MLA's door, and every single media person's door to make sure that the story of trans people remains told and remains at the forefront of our political discussions moving forward. I want folks to know that now's not the time to lose hope, right? And participating once every 4 years is not good enough when our rights are being taken away. We all need to participate, and especially our members of parliament, right, in progressing our society forward and making sure that our values, right, our stated values align with our actions as government. Of course, the issue is very close to me as a person, and I can fully commit with every ounce of my being to protecting the rights of every single Canadian because I know exactly what it's like when those rights are taken for granted by our government.
Thank you, Bo. I invite Jazrain to respond next.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Bo. I appreciate that so much. The Green Party of Canada unequivocally defends the rights and freedoms of queer and trans people, including trans youth and their families. In the face of rising hate and harmful policy rollbacks in parts of Canada, a Green government plans to take bold, proactive steps to protect human rights and ensure equity for all of us and protections for queer and trans youth and people. We want to enshrine gender-affirming healthcare, especially for youth, as a protected right under the Canada Health Act, ensuring consistent, accessible, and respectful care across all provinces and territories. We plan to challenge discriminatory provincial policies through federal oversight and upholding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms as a baseline for all Canadians. The Greens are looking to create a national strategy to combat anti-2SLGBTQIA plus hate with funding for education, public awareness, community safety, and mental health supports. We're looking to invest in 2SLGBTQIA plus organizations, especially those led by trans, non-binary, and two-spirit people, to ensure those directly impacted shape the solutions. Now to voters, constituents, and representatives in the room. We need to stop shying away from political conversations around queer and trans rights and safety. Limitations on our own embodied agency, that's political. The weaponization of the word woke is political. The privilege to disconnect when overwhelmed is intensely political. So push hard, be loud, be brave. Don't allow this issue to fall by the wayside as we deal with an irrational actor to the south. Personally, this is what I am dedicating my life to. I'm not interested in incremental, creeping change. I'm interested in sweeping, bold reform and transformational policies. And that is what the Green Party is offering. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our candidates. Next, I would like to invite...
Est-ce que vous voulez que je réponde aussi?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Mona Fautier,
Il n'y a pas de souci.
please do respond. Do not let me cut you off.
No worries. It's all good. I think we're all on the same page. This is a very important election. We're having a lot of pressures coming down from the South. That is one that I am very concerned about. And our party is also very concerned with. We need to protect everyone's rights here in our country. And we have to make sure they are respected. As mentioned in French earlier, and I want to repeat it, it's important that we not use the notwithstanding clause for protecting people's rights. This is not something that can be done. And I'm very worried that somebody like Pierre Poilievre, if he is in government, would use it at his own, sa propre volonté de l'utiliser. Sometimes my French comes in front of my English. And we've seen provinces use it carelessly and often to punch down on marginalized communities. And that worries me a lot. I mentioned earlier, like a woman's right to choose, the access to gender affirming care is not about an individual's decisions or circumstances, but a stake in the ground for the right to self-determination in a free and democratic society. Now, it's also important to stand up, and that is something our party will do, it will continue to do. There are issues that I wanted to share from the platform that I haven't had a chance to. And I think one that will be important so that we can all continue to work on advocacy and also on rights is that we will be making funding permanent for the 2SLGBTQI plus Community Capacity Fund to support community organizations and networks that protect rights and advance equality across Canada. That is something that we are committed to, and I'm looking forward to working with the network to engage and make sure this becomes permanent.
Merci, Mona, and my apologies again. Thank you also to our other candidates for their answers. Now the question I was so enthusiastic to introduce. I'm going to invite Karen from the 519 again to ask a second question.
Thanks, Zia. This question's with respect to the discriminalization of sex work. So, will your party commit to repealing the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act, recognizing the ways that the current laws endanger sex workers, but also compound harms around HIV, criminalization, especially for queer and trans people? And then, if I may, Madame Fortier, just in relation to your answer to my previous question, we heard the exact same talking points around decriminalization in 2019 before prohibition, that it would be a priority after re-election. In your response you gave me, I did not hear a firm yes or no as to whether the Liberal Party will commit to repealing decriminalization of HIV within the first session of Parliament.
I'll invite Mona Fortier to respond first, then Beauchamp, then Jasreen.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. And unfortunately, I don't have that answer for you, as this is a question that I would have to ask our leader. It is not currently in the platform, and I do want to get that answer for you before the end of the election period. I will, of course, send it to you and maybe be able to give that statement to all of you who are participating, but I do not have that answer. I do know, and what I've been discussing is that we need to continue to advance together and make sure that we protect and we bring forward the recommendations that were submitted in their report, and look at how we can bring that forward. And I hope this answer is fair to be able to answer that question to you. Merci pour l'opportunité.
Thank you very much. Beauchamp?
Sorry, I just want to give Mona a opportunity to answer on the question of sex work as well.
Je vous ai donné la réponse déjà. I have been asked to step in to support Yasser for the second hour, and I don't have the answer at this time, but I will be checking with the party and the center to make sure that I don't give the wrong answer. I know that I am, of course, working on making sure that I give good answers, and when I don't have the answer, I check in first.
Of course. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to answer that as well, because I just wanted to make sure it was all fair. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, the NDP has always supported decriminalizing sex work. That has not changed, and it will not change. Again, the only thing that needs to change is the political will from all other parties to decriminalize sex work and to decriminalize, HIV stigmatization in our law system. So I did notice that question was actually two questions in one prior to now. So I just want to make sure that we're answering them both fairly. So I think that's about it, right? I support it. I think the NDP wholeheartedly and has consistently supported legalization of sex work in order to protect folks from facing criminalization, in particular with regards to HIV as well. Right? I think those two things are compounded with one another. When people are put in unsafe situations where they're facing criminalization, they are less likely to come forward. They are less likely to seek help. They are less likely to get tested, and they're less likely to know how to participate safely in sex work and also in their regular lives. Right? So if our government's unable to support that, then it remains to be seen. I hope that we can make that change in the future.
Thank you very much. And I invite Jasreen to respond.
Yes, thank you. That was a great answer, Bo. Yes, the Greens are totally committed to decriminalizing sex work. Our 2025 platform recognizes that current laws under the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act, PCEPA, fail to protect sex workers, and instead we increase their vulnerability to exploitation, to violence, to police harassment, and these harms are especially severe and intense for queer and trans racialized sex workers, most of whom already experience barriers to safe employment, healthcare, housing, legal protection. We support repealing PCEPA and adopting a rights-based harm reduction approach that centers the voices of sex workers. It's obviously essential to decriminalize sex work, not only to ensure safety, dignity, access to justice, but also to address overlapping injustices like the criminalization of HIV non-disclosure and poverty that disproportionately impact 2SLGBTQIA+ communities. We plan to work with sex worker-led organizations and community advocates to implement evidence-based policies, improve access to healthcare and social supports, eliminate laws that fuel stigma and systemic violence, and we want to uphold human rights. And that means creating conditions where all people, including sex workers, can live free from fear and coercion. Obviously, decriminalization is just a necessary next step towards creating a more equitable and compassionate nation. I also want to take a moment here, if you don't mind, to note very clearly that the Green Party does not whip votes. That's to say that while other parties need to pause and defer to leaders, the Green MPs and MP candidates are empowered to speak not only to our platform, but also our own personal ethical commitments and policy commitments. And we're allowed to vote the way that we see fit, which is a very unique thing with the Greens. And I think that is important for viewers, constituents, voters to note. Thank you.
Thank you all for your responses. Next, we will move on to Emmett Mark from the Dignity Network to ask the next question.
Great, thank you, Zia. Our coalition at Dignity Network Canada is proud to include and engage with NGOs doing outstanding work in championing LGBTIQ refugee rights, protection, and resettlement. Canada itself has long presented as a global leader in human rights, including as a destination for refugees fleeing persecution. However, LGBTIQ refugees and displaced people continue to face significant barriers from accessing safe pathways and resettlement programs to navigating systemic challenges once they arrive here in Canada. If your party forms government, what concrete steps will you take to strengthening Canada's role in protecting and resettling LGBTIQ refugees and displaced people fleeing violence and persecution around the world?
Thank you. I invite the candidates to respond in the following order: Beau Shaw, Jasreen, then Mona Farti.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think this question is much in line with the previous one, actually. LGBTIQ, sorry, my apologies. Refugees and newcomers to Canada deserve to have a specific pathway to citizenship for themselves. They deserve to have the same access to care and safety that, even our very, newly accepted Ukrainian refugee friends were able to receive. That treatment is not universal, by the way, right? Not all refugees are given the same settlement packages, right? In fact, Palestinian refugees, for example, only about 1,000 of them, increased by 500 from 500 in the last 18 months of genocide that they've been experiencing. They receive nothing when they arrive in Canada. They receive no support. It is entirely on their community to support them with language supports, monetary supports, cultural supports, housing supports, right? So making sure that equality is given to every single refugee is of paramount importance. I think that if we're meaning what we say when we say Canada is, a welcoming country for refugees fleeing persecution, then we must apply that to all refugees, but also create specific supports for the specific needs of certain groups, right? If we're choosing to say that we are a safe haven country for LGBTQ LGBTIQ folks, then we need to make sure that our supports are funded appropriately, they are delivered appropriately, and they're accessed appropriately by the people who need them. So, of course, again, we do have the money to fund these programs, right? We have the money in our tax base. We have the money that is currently not being collected due to offshore tax avoidance. All of that money could be put towards funding all of these wonderful programs that we've talked about today, including resettlement programs for LGBTIQ refugees in Canada.
Thank you very much. I invite Jasreen to respond.
Thank you. That's a wonderful question, and I appreciate it, Emmett and Bo. I appreciate your response. The Greens are committed to strengthening Canada's role as a real haven for LGBTIQ refugees and displaced people. If elected, the Greens will create faster, safer, more accessible, unique, and specific pathways for LGBTIQ folks fleeing violence and oppression around the world. And if I am elected as MP in Ngauj Peterborough, I will push hard for this in Ottawa, regardless of who is in office. We know that being queer or trans in many places can mean facing criminalization, abuse, even death, and that Canada has a responsibility to respond with compassion and action. And this is something that we have really failed to do in a meaningful way. We're planning to work very closely with community organizations such as yours, Emmett, to support refugees before and after they arrive, to make sure that they have access to safe housing, mental health care, gender-affirming services, and legal support. We also want to ensure that our embassies can offer real protection to those currently experiencing crisis. Beyond that, the Greens are looking to increase funding to global programs that support LGBTIQ rights and to make sure that our refugee system is far more fair, far more respectful, and actually inclusive. And personally, I can share with you all that I've been sitting as the president of our university's grad student association for 2 years, and before that was our equity commissioner for 2 years. And I cannot tell you how many LGBTIQ international students and refugees that are now attending our programs are experiencing profound housing precarity, food insecurity, real crisis, real interactions with state-sponsored and sometimes legislated violence and deportation. So this is something that I care a lot about, that I talk a lot about. I'm very grateful for the work that your organization is doing, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about this here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I invite Mona Foti to respond.
Thank you very much. And in the platform, we will add additional funding for the LGBTQI plus International Assistance Program to provide the support for individuals that are facing persecution abroad, promote global equality, and also partner with international organizations. We also mentioned earlier, I believe Yasser in his first remarks mentioned that we will expand the Rainbow Refugee Assistance Program or partnership, pardon me. The one thing I want to say in a personal note, in my experience as a member of parliament and as an ally, I've had local organizations come to me and tell me that we need to work on specific cases. And I have had the privilege of working with these local organizations on specific cases, some that were very hard to learn about and to see how difficult it can be for some individuals that are coming from very war-torn countries and even other countries that did not want to have the individuals to be able to come to Canada. And I have to say that I learned and I understand that these programs need to be available, but they also need to be modernized. And I believe that engaging with the community will give me as an MP the opportunity, if I get elected in the next government, to really modify and make sure that we expand those programs the right way. We've had some learning opportunities, that things that worked and didn't work, but we really need to make sure that we expand to help as many that we can that will come in this country and have a place that they can call home and a safe place that they can call home.
Merci, thank you. I would like to invite Faye Johnstone back from Queer Momentum to ask a second question.
Thank you, Zia. And thank you, candidates, for the response to the first set of questions. I often have the role of my organization as an advocacy organization, so our role is to push all parties to do more and do better on queer and trans issues. And so, to put it bluntly, as we've looked at this election over the past month, we have not been impressed by the ways that parties have engaged on queer and trans issues. As we witness Donald Trump undertaking an existential assault on the freedom, dignity, and rights of transgender Americans, as folks wonder if they're able to safely travel to America, to see their families, to vacation, to live their lives. And as we see that rise of hate here in Canada, we haven't seen much mention from any party on queer and trans issues. Some included specifics in their platforms, but they were not specifics that made it into dedicated announcements or much public dialogue. I don't want an election, and we don't want an election on queer and trans issues. Our message to the House prior to the election was to keep our communities out of your mouths and to let's get back to building a better Canada after this election is complete. But I believe that Canadians want elected officials who defend freedom, equality, and human rights. And so if you are elected and if your party forms government, why should we trust you to speak up for us, given this global backlash and given the relative absence of dialogue on our issues through this election cycle? Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. I invite the candidates to respond in the following order: Jazz Rain, Mona Fortier, Beau Shaw.
Thank you. This is something that I'm also very frustrated with when I'm reading different policy announcements and when I watch federal debates and when I sometimes get questions in advance of local debates or I'm in them and the end comes and we haven't talked about anything that I think is important, including queer and trans issues, because we're so busy talking about tariffs and the Republican administration. I'm not even going to attribute it to Trump at this point. I want to reassure everybody and myself, which I need to do, that the Green Party has always been very deeply committed to queer and trans rights in every way, right? We really put our money where our mouth is here. We know what we stand for and we act on what we stand for. And it's not to say that we've always been perfect, that there have never been any missteps at any point, but there's a real and robust accountability from the Green Party. We have sex workers running for member of parliament. We have many, many trans MPs and MP candidates, that are running with a great deal of support from our organizers. And this is something that we are all talking about. And by doing things like implementing a significant wealth tax, we are creating the conditions to address many of the structural issues that disproportionately impact queer and trans, 2SLGBTQIA plus adults, children, and seniors in Canada and newcomers. So yeah, same. And also, it's the Green Party. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mona Fortier?
Oui, merci beaucoup. And Faye, I think you're absolutely right. We haven't talked about this nationally, but we have locally, I have to say. In my riding of Ottawa, Vanier, Gloucester, it has been a conversation, not only in debates, but also at the door. And for me, and I know for the Liberal Party, this is something that we want to continue to partner and to continue to invest and make sure that we protect the rights of everyone, including the 2SLGBTQI plus community. One demonstration that we've done in the past years is to invest in the national, it was the first Canada's first national action plan, which we invested 100 million and to support the community. And that money has been very useful. And we need to continue to fund these activities to make sure that the organization work with the government to advance the different measures that we need to advance. I also have to say that when I was speaking with different youth, especially at high schools that I went to, they mentioned how we need to protect the rights. And I said that I wanted to work together. And actually, one thing I have in the riding is a Ottawa Vanier Youth Council, which now will be called Ottawa Vanier Gloucester Youth Council if I get elected. And this is a topic that we want to work together and bring different measures that will respond to the needs. So those are actions that I, as an elected official, want to influence my colleagues and also the leader to make this a conversation that needs to be not only shared locally, but also nationally. And I have the privilege of having 5 more days, like my other colleagues that are trying to get on the ballot, voted on the ballot, that we have 5 more days to talk about this. And I will call the leader to make sure that we have an opportunity to share thoughts of the Liberal Party nationally. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. And we will hear from Beauchamp next.
Yeah, I, of course, agree that none of the three major parties, and of course, the Green Party hasn't had the opportunity to speak on the national debate stage, have not mentioned, queer and trans rights. And I do find it quite rich that we want to talk about it on a national level after all the advance votes have been cast. That sucks, right? That sucks for us as queer people. That sucks for me as a trans person. That sucks for young people looking to their government and hoping that they will speak to them. I know a lot of young people actually feel really disenfranchised from their vote. They feel disenfranchised from their vote because of outright genocide denial. They feel outside, taken away from feeling like their vote counts when it comes to queer and trans issues, right? In order for our government to increase participation from youth and even from some older folks too, who feel like their vote no longer counts because they're not being spoken to by the people who are seeking to be elected, right? I've been speaking about trans issues from day one. I've been advocating on a grassroots level, right? Queer Citizens United, the organization that I run, entirely volunteer based, by the way. It's me and 6 other trans people knocking on doors, getting petitions signed in order to sue the Alberta government for infringing on our rights. We did that without the government. I just want people to know that you have the power to make change regardless of who ends up in office at the end of this election. I do hope, people will cast their ballots for me, but at the same time, I think that the biggest thing that we've changed in our politics this election is the way we discuss our politics. Before now, we had never heard the word genocide with regards to Palestine on our national debate stage. Before now, we had never heard about queer and trans rights on a national level, right? Let alone a provincial level, because for the most part, we were just kind of ignored. And, I kind of wish we could go back to that, but Pandora's box has been opened. So now we have to talk about our issues, and now we have to talk about the fact that policy needs to change. Our policy makers need to be engaged with us if they expect to win our votes, right? Otherwise, if you're not going to put your money where your mouth is, I don't see why you're running for office in the first place. So I really want to thank all the candidates for participating today. It takes a lot to answer some of these really difficult questions. I think that I'm really happy with the fact that we've got 100 or so really dedicated people listening to their candidates and being engaged in their civic duty on a level that honestly we haven't even seen before. Record number of people cast their votes in the advanced ballots, and that's amazing. Right? I want people to know that no matter who you vote for, your vote counts for something. Even if your candidate doesn't win, your vote counts for something, right? It means that there is an appetite for that kind of politic in your area. And that means that even third parties like myself and the Green Party, right? We have the chance to get more resources. We have the chance to knock on more doors, to get more donors, more volunteers, you name it, so that next time we can make sure that our issues are at the front of the discussion, not an afterthought.
Thank you very much to all the candidates for answering that question. We have time for one final question this evening, so I would like to invite Jade Pichette from Pride at Work back to ask a second question.
Thank you to all the candidates. This has been such a wonderful discussion. So the previous government received policy recommendations to modernize the Employment Equity Act. Would your party support adding Black and 2SLGBTQIA plus people as designated groups under the Act? And beyond legislative changes, what other steps would your party take to advance employment equity for 2SLGBTQIA plus communities? Thank you.
I invite candidates to respond in the following order: Mona Fortier, Beau Shaw, and Jazrain.
Thank you for that very important question. And it's really important that we can share the work that has been done and that needs to be continued, of course. As a government, we announced our commitment to modernize the Employment Equity Act, as you mentioned, by designating Black and 2SLGBTQI plus people as groups under the Employment Equity Act, along with other modernization of the Act. This task force was created to lead the consultations, and these consultations led to the release of a report. And this will be used to inform, of course, the changes that we need to bring forward. Therefore, being elected government, we will bring forward these changes. I would also mention that because we were in election period, I would suggest that we have conversation just to make sure that we have had the opportunity to gather through the consultation everyone's voices, because sometimes it's not done in a short period of time. And when I was president of the Treasury Board, I did know that sometimes we needed to provoke and call people up to make sure that we have the right regulations and legislation to move forward. I could continue on this, but I truly believe this is the next step forward, is to work together and make sure that it's done when and if we get back into government.
Thank you very much. Beau Shaw?
Yeah, I am well aware of the recommendations for government, so I'll just read them out very quickly for folks who are not familiar. Exploring policy and legislative levers that promote system-level changes, like strengthening anti-discrimination legislation and other labor market protections and standards. Of course, the NDP are in full support of that. Funding labor market interventions, fostering safe and inclusive workspace environments for 2SLGBTQIA plus employees, including through support for civil society actors that build organizational capacity in this realm. 100% behind that. I think most of us would agree, actually. Investing in multi-sectoral solutions that support 2SLGBTQIA plus people to thrive across different life domains, including education, housing, and mental health. Continue to implement more systematic and inclusive data collection in population-level surveys. I think throughout answering the questions today, of course, I have provided that we will fund population-level surveys. We will fund jobs training programs, in particular for 2SLGBTQIA folks, in order for them to participate more equitably in the workplace and create a market incentive for employers, right? Sometimes employers don't respond to anything other than market incentives. Let's just be honest, right? I've been a queer person. I've been a trans person in the workforce since I was 12 years old. Right? I've had some very good employers and I've had some very bad employers. And so making sure that our employers are held to a certain standard, in particular for workplace protections, in terms of labor protections as well, right? We've had, back to work orders that I did not agree with from our government in the last session. And I really think that some of that lack of addressing these issues will continue to foment, right? I think that if we continue to put this on the back burner, we will have more and more people with more and more inequity in the workplace. So, of course, we want fulsome consultation, including research and implementing strategies like the ones that Pride at Work have implemented in the energy sector. And we want to make sure that more sectoral work is done, especially in the skilled trades and emerging technology, specifically renewables, and specifically power grid expansion and data centers, actually, because data sovereignty is a big issue here in Canada. A lot of our data is actually stored in the United States. And I can tell you one thing I know about queer people in the workplace. Every single one of them that makes more than me works in tech.
Thank you very much. I invite Jazrain to respond.
Oh, how am I going to follow that? Thanks, Beau. Yes, great question. The Greens are obviously calling for a stronger and much more inclusive Employment Equity Act that reflects the realities of today's workforce and protects all workers, but especially LGBTIQ folks. The current act obviously takes many important steps to support women, Indigenous peoples, folks with disabilities, racialized communities, but it doesn't go nearly far enough, which is why we're talking about it now. And so we feel it's time to expand those protections to explicitly include 2SLGBTQIA+ workers, and yes, Black workers, especially those who are gender diverse and face multiple and intersecting layers of discrimination or oppression. But updating the law is just the beginning. We need to move beyond these checkboxes and quotas towards real and measurable equity. We need to be holding employers accountable, making hiring and pay practices transparent, and ensuring folks from equity-deserving groups aren't just getting in the door, but they're being supported, respected, and uplifted once they're there. The Green Party is obviously committed to transforming workplaces into spaces where everybody can thrive and be safe. We want justice on the job. We need bold action and not just empty promises of future policy. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for all of your responses. That brings us to the conclusion of Proud to Vote 2025. I want to say thank you to all of the candidates who joined us this evening and shared their party stances on issues that matter to us LGBTQIA+ people. I also want to thank our audience for tuning in to our important conversation on these issues that matter the most. And finally, I want to thank our partner organizations that made this possible: Queer Momentum, Pride at Work Canada, the Dignity Network, the Conseil LGBTQ Québécois, and the CBRC, as well as Enchanté Network. So thank you, everyone, for being here today. That is my time, but before we sign off completely, I want to throw it back to Faye Johnstone to end out the night.
Thank you so much, Zia. Thank you, candidates. I guess this is first a message to everyone who is still in the audience. Don't forget to vote. Talk to your friends, your family, your uncle, your neighbors about what's at stake for you, and help them make informed decisions. And I want to end with a thank you to Zia and to Xtra Magazine and Pink Triangle Press. Zia, you're a kick-ass moderator. You manage the conversation. It's never easy when there's like 3 different candidates. And so big round of applause to you. And with that, I think we'll invite everyone to go about the rest of their days. Thank you to our partners, our attendees, candidates. Good luck in the next 5 days. And we'll see you at the polls. Bye, folks.
Merci beaucoup, Faye. Thank you so much, everyone.